In the fictional mountain town of South Park, Colorado, where fourth graders navigate everything from alien abductions to political scandals, one orange-hooded figure stands as perhaps the most enigmatic character in the entire animated universe. Kenny McCormick, with his perpetually muffled voice and tendency towards spectacular deaths, began as what many assumed was simply a throwaway gag character. Yet over more than 2 decades of episodes, Kenny has evolved into something far more complex and meaningful than anyone could have anticipated when South Park first premiered in 1997. At first glance, Kenny appears to be the simplest of the 4 main characters. While Stan Marsh serves as the show's moral center, Kyle Broflovsky represents intellectual discourse, and Eric Cartman embodies pure chaos. Kenny seems to exist primarily to die in increasingly elaborate ways before returning the next episode, as if nothing happened. His dialogue, perpetually muffled by that iconic orange parka, often goes unheard or misunderstood by both characters and viewers alike. This apparent simplicity, however, masks one of television animation's most fascinating character studies. The genius of Kenny McCormick lies not in what's immediately apparent, but in what's hidden beneath layers of running gags and seemingly throwaway moments. Creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone crafted Kenny as more than just comic relief. They created a character who embodies themes of poverty, mortality, heroism, and the often overlooked voices in society. Kenny's muffled speech serves as a perfect metaphor for how society treats the poor and marginalized, present but unheard, acknowledged but not truly understood. Kenny's poverty isn't just a character trait, it's the foundation of his entire existence. The McCormick family represents the working poor of America, struggling with unemployment, substance abuse, and the daily humiliation of economic disadvantage. While his friends worry about typical childhood concerns, Kenny's reality includes frozen waffles for dinner, parents who fight over beer money, and the constant awareness that he's different from his more affluent friends. This economic divide creates a unique perspective that informs every aspect of Kenny's character, from his fierce loyalty to his friends to his protective instincts toward his younger sister Karen. The death and resurrection cycle that defines Kenny's existence operates on multiple levels of meaning. On the surface, it's pure shock comedy. The innocent child meeting increasingly absurd demises only to reappear the next episode without explanation. Beneath this obvious layer, however, lies a darker commentary on how society treats its most vulnerable members. Kenny dies repeatedly, often as a direct result of the chaos created by others, yet his absence is rarely mourned for long. His friends express brief concern before moving on with their lives, mirroring how society acknowledges tragedy among the poor before quickly forgetting and returning to business as usual. What makes Kenny truly fascinating is how the writers gradually revealed that his deaths and resurrections aren't just random occurrences, but part of a larger mythology involving cosmic horror, family curses, and genuine supernatural elements. The revelation that Kenny's parents belong to a cult of Cthulhu and that their son's immortality stems from ancient rituals transforms what seemed like simple comedy into something approaching modern mythology. Kenny becomes a figure caught between life and death, blessed and cursed with the knowledge of his own mortality while being powerless to escape it. The introduction of Mysterion, Kenny's superhero alter ego, marked a crucial evolution in his character development. Through Mysterion, viewers see Kenny's true nature, not the victim of circumstance that his deaths might suggest, but a genuine hero motivated by protection of the innocent and a deep sense of justice. Mysterion's existence reveals that Kenny's experiences with death have given him a unique perspective on life's value and a determination to prevent others from suffering as he has. His heroic identity serves as the perfect counterpoint to his civilian persona's apparent helplessness. Kenny's relationship with his friends forms another crucial element of his character. While Stan, Kyle, and Cartman often seem to take Kenny's presence for granted, careful observation reveals moments of genuine affection and concern. These relationships highlight Kenny's role as both an insider and outsider within the group. Accepted as one of the core four friends, yet separated by economic and social barriers that his friends don't fully comprehend. His loyalty to them remains unwavering despite their sometimes casual treatment of his deaths, suggesting a character of remarkable resilience and forgiveness. Perhaps most importantly, Kenny represents something rare in animated comedy, a character who maintains innocence and heroism despite experiencing trauma that would break most people. His repeated deaths could have made him cynical or bitter, yet Kenny consistently shows compassion for others, particularly those even more vulnerable than himself. His protection of his sister Karen, his genuine heroism as Mysterian, and his continued friendship with boys who sometimes barely notice his suffering all speak to a strength of character that transcends his humble circumstances. The evolution of Kenny from simple gag character to complex protagonist reflects South Park's own growth as a series. What began as crude humor gradually developed into sophisticated social commentary, and Kenny's journey embodies this transformation perfectly. He serves as proof that even the most seemingly disposable characters can contain depths worth exploring, and that the most important stories often belong to those whose voices are hardest to hear. As we delve deeper into Kenny McCormick's world, we'll explore how a character defined by death actually represents life at its most resilient. We'll examine how poverty shapes perspective, how heroism can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, and how sometimes the most profound truths come from the most muffled voices. Kenny's story is ultimately one of survival, sacrifice, and the quiet heroism of those society too often overlooks. In a world of loud personalities and dramatic gestures, Kenny McCormick reminds us that sometimes the most important people are those we have to listen closest to hear. The phenomenon of Kenny McCormick's deaths began not with grand design or elaborate mythology, but with a simple observation about childhood and the casual cruelty of animated violence. In those early episodes of South Park's first season, Kenny's demises served as punctuation marks to the chaos surrounding the boys' adventures. Sudden, shocking, and strangely matter-of-fact. What started as Trey Parker and Matt Stone's commentary on the disposable nature of secondary characters in children's cartoons quickly evolved into something far more significant and disturbing. Kenny's first death in the pilot episode Cartman Gets an Anal Probe set the template that would define his character for years to come. Struck by UFO's tractor beam and subsequently trampled by a herd of cattle, Kenny's death was both absurd and violent, followed immediately by Stan's iconic, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," and Kyle's response, "You bastards." This exchange became the series' most recognizable catchphrase. But more importantly, it established the fundamental disconnect between the gravity of death and the casual way it's processed by those left behind. The genius of these early deaths lay in their randomness and the complete lack of consequence. Kenny would die in one episode, crushed by a teeter-totter, struck by lightning, or consumed by rats, only to appear alive and well in the next episode's opening scene with no explanation offered. This resurrection cycle created a unique form of dark comedy that forced viewers to confront their own relationship with violence and mortality. Why did we laugh when Kenny died? What did it say about us that we expected and even anticipated these deaths? Parker and Stone drew inspiration from their own childhood experiences, where they knew a kid who wore an orange parka and whose speech was similarly muffled. This real life, Kenny often missed school and seemed to disappear from their social circle regularly, leading to jokes about whether he was dead or alive. This childhood mystery became the foundation for one of television's most enduring running gags, but also reflected deeper truths about how children process loss and how certain kids seem to exist on the periphery of social groups. The deaths themselves became increasingly elaborate as the series progressed. What began as simple accidents evolved into complex Rube Goldberg-style chain reactions that would inevitably conclude with Kenny's demise. Writers competed to create the most outrageous death scenarios. Kenny being shot into space, crushed by a statue, or killed by a falling piano, each death more theatrical than the last. These elaborate setups served multiple purposes, They satisfied audience expectations for novelty. They pushed the boundaries of acceptable content, and they began to hint at the cosmic forces that would later be revealed as controlling Kenny's fate. The psychological impact of these repeated deaths on Kenny himself remained largely unexplored in the early seasons, but careful viewers could detect subtle hints of the trauma that would later become central to his character. Kenny's general fatalism, his willingness to take dangerous risks, and his occasional moments of prescient awareness all suggested a character who had internalized the knowledge of his own mortality in ways that his friends couldn't comprehend. While Stan, Kyle, and Cartman treated death as a temporary inconvenience, Kenny carried the weight of actually experiencing it repeatedly. The show's writers gradually began to experiment with the death formula, introducing variations that would prove crucial to Kenny's later development. Some episodes featured Kenny surviving when viewers expected him to die, while others killed him off early only to have him appear later in the same episode. These deviations from the established pattern served to highlight just how central Kenny's deaths had become to the series' identity, while also suggesting that there might be more to the phenomenon than simple random violence. One of the most significant early developments was the introduction of Kenny's consciousness during his deaths. Rather than simply cutting away from the violence, certain episodes began to linger on Kenny's final moments, showing his awareness of what was happening to him. This shift from external comedy to internal horror marked the beginning of Kenny's transformation from victim to tragic hero. Viewers began to see Kenny not as a disposable character, but as someone trapped in a cycle of suffering that he couldn't escape or explain. The reactions of Kenny's friends to his deaths also evolved during this period. While their initial responses were purely comedic, the reflexive, "Oh my God," followed by calling someone bastards, occasional episodes revealed genuine grief beneath the routine. These moments of authentic emotion suggested that the boys' casual treatment of Kenny's deaths was itself a coping mechanism, a way of processing trauma that was too overwhelming to fully acknowledge. Perhaps most importantly, the early death episodes established Kenny as fundamentally different from his friends in ways that extended beyond economic status. While Stan, Kyle, and Cartman lived in a world where actions had consequences and death was permanent, Kenny existed in a liminal space where normal rules didn't apply. This supernatural element, though not yet explained, marked Kenny as special in ways that wouldn't be fully revealed until much later in the series. The cultural impact of Kenny's deaths extended far beyond South Park itself. The "Oh my God, they killed Kenny" phrase became a cultural touchstone, referenced in everything from other television shows to political commentary. Kenny's deaths became a shorthand for expendable characters and meaningless violence in media, while also serving as a critique of audiences' appetite for destruction and suffering. As the first season progressed, it became clear that Kenny's deaths served multiple narrative functions. They provided reliable comedy beats, they offered opportunities for increasingly creative animated violence, and they began to establish South Park's willingness to tackle serious subjects through the lens of dark humor. Most importantly, they created a character whose relationship with mortality was unlike anything else on television, setting the stage for the complex mythology and character development that would follow in later seasons. The McCormick household stands as one of South Park's most devastating portrayals of American poverty, a place where childhood innocence collides daily with adult failures and economic desperation. Unlike the comfortable middle-class homes of Stan, Kyle, and even Cartman, the McCormick residence serves as a constant reminder that not all of South Park's children enjoy the same privileges and securities. Through Kenny's family dynamics, the show explores themes of addiction, neglect, and the cyclical nature of poverty with an unflinching honesty that's both heartbreaking and darkly comedic. Stuart McCormick, Kenny's father, embodies the frustrations of the chronically underemployed working class, a man whose dreams have been systematically crushed by economic reality. Stuart moves from job to job, construction worker, security guard, warehouse employee, never finding stable employment that can support his family's basic needs. His drinking isn't portrayed as a moral failing, but as a symptom of deeper despair. a way of numbing the daily humiliation of being unable to provide for his children. Stewart's anger often erupts in violent arguments with his wife, creating an atmosphere of instability that permeates every aspect of Kenny's home life. Carol McCormick, Kenny's mother, represents the other side of poverty's impact on family structures. Where Stewart's response to their circumstances is rage and alcohol, Carol's is resignation and prescription drug abuse. Her addiction to various medications, painkillers, antidepressants, and sleeping pills reflects a healthcare system that medicates poverty's symptoms rather than addressing its causes. Carol's emotional unavailability, while tragic, is also understandable given the overwhelming stress of managing a household with insufficient resources and an increasingly unstable partner. The physical conditions of the McCormick home tell their own story of economic hardship. Broken windows patched with cardboard, furniture held together with duct tape, and a general state of disrepair that reflects both lack of money for maintenance and the psychological impact of living in constant financial stress. The refrigerator contains little more than beer and frozen waffles, Kenny's standard dinner, highlighting the food insecurity that affects millions of American children. These details aren't played purely for laughs. They're authentic representations of how poverty manifests in daily life. Perhaps most tragically, the McCormick household demonstrates how poverty becomes self-perpetuating across generations. Stewart and Carol's own childhoods were likely marked by similar economic instability, and their inability to break this cycle means that Kenny and his sister Karen are growing up with the same disadvantages their parents faced. The show illustrates how poverty isn't just about lack of money. It's about lack of opportunity, lack of stability, and lack of hope for meaningful change. Kenny's role within this dysfunctional family structure is complex and often heartbreaking. At an age when most children are focused on games and friendships, Kenny bears adult responsibilities that no child should carry. He often serves as a mediator between his fighting parents, attempting to maintain some semblance of peace in a household characterized by chaos. His protective instincts toward his younger sister, Karen, reveal a maturity born from necessity. He understands that if he doesn't look out for her, no one else will. The impact of witnessing domestic violence on Kenny's psychological development cannot be overstated. Regular exposure to his parents' physical and verbal altercations has taught him that violence is a normal part of relationships, that problems are solved through aggression rather than communication. This learned behavior helps explain Kenny's later acceptance of his own repeated deaths. Violence has been normalized in his world to such an extent that even his own mortality becomes just another form of chaos to endure. Food insecurity plays a crucial role in Kenny's daily existence, affecting everything from his physical development to his social interactions. While his friends take family meals for granted, Kenny often goes to school hungry, surviving on whatever free or cheap food is available. The frozen waffles that serve as his regular dinner aren't just a running gag. They're a realistic portrayal of how poor families often rely on processed, nutritionally deficient foods that offer calories but little else. This malnutrition may contribute to Kenny's smaller stature compared to his friends and could even play a role in his frequent deaths. The McCormick family's relationship with various social services reveals another layer of poverty's complexity. While agencies exist to help families in crisis, the McCormicks often fall through cracks in the system, too functional to warrant intervention, but too dysfunctional to thrive. Stewart and Carol's pride prevents them from seeking help they desperately need, while their addictions and instability make them unreliable participants in any assistance programs. This creates a frustrating cycle where help is theoretically available but practically inaccessible. Kenny's parents' involvement with the cult of Cthulhu, while supernatural in its implications, also reflects real-world patterns of how desperate people are drawn to fringe groups that promise meaning and power. When conventional religion, social services, and economic systems fail to provide hope or stability, alternative belief systems can seem attractive, even when they're dangerous. The ritual that cursed Kenny with immortality represents the ultimate expression of parental selfishness, a decision made by adults that condemns their child to eternal suffering. The contrast between the McCormick household and Kenny's friends' homes serves to highlight the arbitrary nature of childhood circumstances. Kenny is no less intelligent, creative, or deserving than Stan, Kyle, or Cartman. Yet his opportunities are dramatically limited by factors completely beyond his control. This disparity in childhood experiences shapes not only Kenny's present, but his future possibilities, creating barriers that may prove impossible to overcome regardless of his individual efforts or talents. Perhaps most significantly, the McCormick family tragedy demonstrates how poverty affects children's emotional development in ways that extend far beyond material deprivation. Kenny's emotional resilience, while admirable, comes at the cost of normal childhood experiences like security, stability, and unconditional parental love. His fierce independence and protective instincts are survival mechanisms developed in response to parental neglect, not natural personality traits. The show's portrayal of the McCormick family avoids both romanticizing poverty and demonizing the poor. Stuart and Carol are neither heroes nor villains. They're human beings struggling with circumstances that would challenge anyone, making mistakes that hurt their children while also displaying moments of genuine love and concern. This nuanced approach helps viewers understand that poverty is a systemic issue rather than a personal moral failing, while never excusing the real harm that parental addiction and neglect inflict on children. The revelation that Kenny McCormick's repeated deaths and resurrections stem from his parents' involvement with the cult of Cthulhu represents one of South Park's most ambitious narrative developments, transforming what began as simple dark comedy into genuine cosmic horror. This supernatural explanation not only provides a mythological framework for Kenny's immortality, but also serves as a devastating commentary on how parental choices can condemn children to suffer consequences they never chose and cannot escape. The cult of Cthulhu connection emerges gradually throughout the series, with early hints appearing in seemingly throwaway background details before exploding into full narrative significance. H.P. Lovecraft's cosmic horror mythology, with its themes of incomprehensible ancient forces and humanity's insignificance in the face of cosmic indifference, provides the perfect framework for understanding Kenny's predicament. Just as Lovecraft's protagonists often find themselves trapped by forces beyond their comprehension or control, Kenny exists as a victim of powers that operate according to rules he never agreed to follow. Stuart and Carol McCormick's involvement with the cult initially appears to be another manifestation of their general dysfunction and poor decision-making. Like many desperately poor and psychologically damaged individuals, they were drawn to a fringe religious group that promised meaning, power, and transformation. The cult offered them something that conventional religion, social services, and economic systems had failed to provide: a sense of agency and importance in a world that consistently marginalized and ignored them. The specific ritual that cursed Kenny involves ancient rites designed to curry favor with Cthulhu, the cosmic entity that represents chaos, death, and the ultimate meaninglessness of human existence. In participating in these rituals, Kenny's parents essentially traded their son's normal mortality for their own perceived benefits from a cult. This transaction reveals the ultimate expression of parental selfishness: adults making decisions that condemn their child to eternal suffering while potentially benefiting themselves. The curse itself operates on multiple levels of meaning within Kenny's existence. On the most literal level, it explains the mechanics of his death and resurrection cycle. Kenny dies, experiences a period in what appears to be a hellish afterlife dimension, and then is reborn to his mother, retaining full memory of his previous deaths and the torment he experiences between lives. This cycle condemns Kenny to eternal childhood, never aging, never escaping, never finding peace through final death. What makes Kenny's situation particularly tragic is his complete awareness of his condition. Unlike his friends, who forget his deaths almost immediately, Kenny retains full memory of every violent end he's experienced and every moment of suffering in the afterlife. This knowledge transforms him from a simple victim of violence into a character bearing cosmic-level trauma. He knows that death is not an ending, but merely another form of suffering, and that no matter what he does or how careful he is, the cycle will continue indefinitely. The cult's influence extends beyond just Kenny's immediate family to encompass a broader network of South Park residents who have been drawn into Cthulhu worship. This reveals that Kenny's situation, while unique in its specific manifestation, represents a broader pattern of how desperate people can be manipulated by forces that promise power or meaning while delivering only suffering and enslavement. The cult serves as a metaphor for any system, religious, economic, or social, that exploits people's vulnerabilities while claiming to offer salvation. The Lovecraftian elements in Kenny's story also serve to comment on the arbitrary nature of suffering in the real world. Just as Lovecraft's cosmic entities operate according to incomprehensible motivations that render human concerns meaningless, Kenny's curse represents suffering that serves no purpose and offers no possibility of redemption or escape. His deaths aren't meaningful sacrifices or learning experiences. They're simply manifestations of cosmic indifference to human welfare. Kenny's knowledge of his condition creates a unique form of psychological torture that goes far beyond the physical trauma of repeated death. He must live each day knowing that death is not only inevitable but temporary, that any peace or happiness he might find will be interrupted by violence and suffering, and that this cycle will continue regardless of his actions or desires. This knowledge isolates him from his friends, who cannot understand or even remember his experiences, leaving him alone with cosmic-level trauma. The cult's rituals and beliefs also reflect real-world patterns of how fringe religious groups exploit vulnerable populations. Stuart and Carol McCormick's involvement represents the genuine desperation that drives people toward extreme religious practices when conventional support systems fail them. Their willingness to sacrifice their sons' well-being for their own perceived spiritual advancement reveals how cult manipulation can corrupt even basic parental instincts. The connection to Cthulhu mythology also serves to elevate Kenny's story from local South Park comedy to universal themes about fate, free will, and the struggle against forces beyond human control. Kenny becomes a figure comparable to classical tragic heroes, someone trapped by circumstances beyond his control, fighting against a destiny that cannot be changed, maintaining dignity and heroism despite cosmic indifference to his suffering. Perhaps most significantly, the cult connection explains why Kenny's heroic identity as Mysterian develops as it does. His repeated exposure to death and cosmic horror has given him unique insights into the nature of suffering and injustice. Unlike his friends, who live in a world where death is final and consequences are permanent, Kenny operates with the knowledge that pain and death are temporary conditions that can be endured and overcome. This perspective allows him to take risks and make sacrifices that others cannot, transforming his curse into a form of tragic heroism. The Cthulhu cult storyline also demonstrates South Park's evolution from simple shock comedy to sophisticated horror comedy that can address serious themes through supernatural metaphors. By grounding Kenny's deaths in cosmic horror rather than simple cartoon violence, the writers transformed a running gag into genuine mythology that explores themes of parental responsibility, religious exploitation, and the arbitrary nature of suffering. The ultimate tragedy of Kenny's situation lies not just in his repeated deaths, but in the complete absence of justice or meaning in his suffering. Unlike traditional religious or mythological frameworks that promise eventual reward for enduring hardship, the Lovecraftian universe offers no such comfort. Kenny's curse serves no greater purpose, teaches no valuable lessons, and offers no possibility of eventual redemption. It simply is like poverty, like abuse, like all the forms of suffering that define too many children's lives in the real world. The emergence of Mysterian marks a crucial turning point in Kenny McCormick's character development, transforming him from passive victim of cosmic forces into active agent of justice and protection. This superhero identity represents Kenny's refusal to allow his unique relationship with death to remain merely a source of personal suffering. instead channeling his supernatural experiences into a force for good that operates beyond the normal limitations of mortality and consequence. Mysterian's origin story reflects a fundamental truth about heroism. It often emerges from suffering rather than strength. Kenny's repeated deaths have given him insights into injustice, vulnerability, and protection that his friends cannot possess. While Stan, Kyle, and Cartman see the world through the lens of childhood invincibility, Kenny operates with a hard-earned knowledge that safety is an illusion and that terrible things can happen to innocent people without warning or reason. This awareness, rather than making him cynical or cruel, has instead fostered a deep empathy for others who face danger. The choice of Mysterian as a superhero name reveals several layers of Kenny's psychological state and self-perception. The name suggests both mystery and anonymity, fitting for a character whose voice is rarely heard clearly and whose deaths go largely unremembered by others. It also reflects Kenny's understanding that his true power lies not in spectacular abilities, but in his willingness to operate in shadows, to do what others cannot or will not do, because they fear consequences that he knows are temporary. Mysterian's costume design serves multiple symbolic functions beyond simple superhero aesthetics. The dark colors and mysterious hood echo Kenny's everyday orange parka, maintaining the theme of concealed identity while shifting from bright visibility to deliberate obscurity. The cape and professional superhero styling represent Kenny's transformation from victim to agent. He's no longer passively waiting for death to find him, but actively seeking out situations where his unique abilities can protect others. The development of Mysterian occurs alongside Kenny's growing awareness of his sister Karen's vulnerability and his increasing frustration with the inadequacy of adult protection systems. While Kenny cannot save himself from the cosmic forces that control his fate, he discovers that he can use his special relationship with death to protect others, particularly those who share his economic and social disadvantages. Mysterian becomes Kenny's way of transforming personal trauma into social justice. Kenny's heroic motivation differs fundamentally from typical superhero origin stories, where most heroes are driven by desire for justice, revenge, or the thrill of using special powers. Mysterian is motivated primarily by protection, specifically the protection of children and the vulnerable. His experiences with death have taught him that life is precious precisely because it is fragile, and his immortality makes him uniquely qualified to risk that life in service of others. The Mysterian identity also allows Kenny to transcend the economic and social limitations that define his civilian life. As Kenny McCormick, he is powerless against his parents' dysfunction, his family's poverty, and the cosmic forces that control his destiny. As Mysterian, he becomes someone who can take action, make a difference, and exercise the kind of agency that poverty typically denies. The superhero identity serves as both literal crime-fighting and metaphorical empowerment. Mysterian's relationship with other superheroes in South Park reveals Kenny's natural leadership abilities and moral clarity, while Cartman's Coon represents ego-driven heroism focused on fame and recognition. Mysterian embodies selfless service motivated by genuine concern for others. Kenny's willingness to work with others while maintaining his own moral standards demonstrates the maturity that his traumatic experiences have forced upon him. The supernatural elements of Mysterian's abilities extend beyond just Kenny's immortality to encompass genuine detective skills, strategic thinking, and an almost supernatural awareness of danger and injustice. His repeated deaths have given him insights into criminal behavior, victim psychology, and the interconnected nature of South Park's various problems. Mysterian operates with the accumulated wisdom of someone who has experienced violence from every possible angle. Perhaps most significantly, Mysterian represents Kenny's refusal to accept victimhood as his permanent state. Rather than allowing his curse to define him as someone who suffers, he chooses to define himself as someone who prevents others from suffering. This transformation from victim to protector represents one of the most psychologically realistic and inspiring character developments in the entire South Park universe. The secret identity aspect of Mysterian serves multiple functions in Kenny's psychological development. It allows him to express aspects of his personality that his economic circumstances and family dysfunction normally suppress. Confidence, leadership, moral authority, and the ability to take decisive action. Mysterian becomes the person Kenny might have been in different circumstances, while also representing who he chooses to be despite his circumstances. Mysterian's investigative work often uncovers the same systemic problems that affect Kenny's personal life: poverty, addiction, child neglect, and institutional failures. This connection between superhero adventures and social reality grounds Mysterian's heroism in authentic concerns rather than fantasy villains. Kenny uses his superhero identity to address real problems that affect real people, particularly children who face the same vulnerabilities he knows intimately. The loneliness of the Mysterian identity reflects Kenny's broader isolation within South Park's social structure. Just as Kenny's economic status separates him from his friends' experiences, his role as Mysterian isolates him from the normal childhood activities and concerns that occupy his peers. The burden of protecting others, combined with the knowledge that his efforts will be forgotten along with his deaths, creates a uniquely tragic form of heroism. Mysterian's moral code reflects Kenny's deep understanding of injustice and his commitment to preventing others from experiencing the kind of helplessness that has defined his own life. His rules about protecting the innocent, especially children, stem directly from his awareness of how adults can fail to protect those who depend on them. Mysterian becomes the protector that Kenny never had, operating according to principles that his own parents never followed. The development of Mysterian also represents Kenny's maturation into someone who can find meaning and purpose despite cosmic indifference to his suffering. Rather than allowing the meaninglessness of his curse to destroy his sense of moral responsibility, Kenny chooses to create meaning through service to others. Mysterian embodies the existential choice to act heroically even in a universe that offers no guarantee of justice or reward. Ultimately, Mysterian serves as proof that heroism can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances and that true strength often develops in response to trauma rather than in spite of it. Kenny's transformation into a genuine superhero represents one of South Park's most sophisticated character developments, demonstrating how suffering can be transformed into service and how the most marginalized individuals can become society's most effective protectors. The Coon and Friends trilogy represents a pivotal moment in South Park's superhero mythology, bringing together the various heroic identities that the boys have developed while exploring themes of leadership, ego, and genuine heroism. Within this complex narrative, Kenny's role as Mysterian becomes both more defined and more tragic, as his authentic heroism contrasts sharply with the ego-driven motivations of his teammates, particularly Eric Cartman's tyrannical leadership as the Coon. The formation of Coon and Friends initially appears to be a natural evolution of the boys' superhero play, but it quickly becomes a microcosm of real-world power dynamics and organizational dysfunction. Cartman's self-appointment as leader and his subsequent authoritarianism create an environment where genuine heroism must struggle against bureaucracy, ego, and the corruption of noble intentions. For Kenny, whose Mysterian identity emerged from authentic trauma and selfless motivation, this commercialization and politicization of heroism represents a fundamental betrayal of what superhero work should accomplish. Cartman's leadership style within Coon and Friends reflects his broader personality traits: narcissistic, manipulative, and ultimately self-serving. His obsession with franchise opportunities, media attention, and corporate sponsorship transforms what should be a mission of service into a business venture designed to benefit himself. This commercialization of heroism directly conflicts with Mysterian's core values, creating tension that ultimately leads to Kenny's departure from the group and his decision to operate independently. The contrast between Cartman's approach to superhero work and Kenny's becomes starkly apparent through their different responses to actual crises. While Cartman sees emergencies as opportunities for publicity and self-promotion, Mysterian focuses entirely on protecting victims and preventing harm. This fundamental disagreement about the purpose of superhero work reflects deeper philosophical differences about responsibility, service, and a relationship between power and moral obligation. Kenny's decision to leave Coon and friends and work alone represents a crucial moment in his character development. Rather than compromising his principles to maintain group membership, he chooses isolation and independence over corruption and ego gratification. This decision demonstrates the maturity and moral clarity that his traumatic experiences have developed, showing that he values authentic heroism more than social acceptance or team belonging. The revelation of Kenny's immortality to his superhero teammates creates a complex dynamic within the group that goes beyond simple superhero dynamics. His ability to die and return gives him capabilities that others lack, but it also isolates him from teammates who cannot understand the psychological burden of his condition. The other heroes' reactions to learning about Kenny's deaths range from fascination to horror, but none of them can truly comprehend the trauma involved in repeated death and resurrection. Mysterian's investigative work during the Coon and Friends period demonstrates his evolution into a genuine detective and crime fighter, rather than simply a costumed adventurer. His ability to uncover the cult connections behind various South Park mysteries shows how his personal experiences with supernatural forces have given him insights that others lack. While his teammates focus on surface-level heroics, Mysterian operates on a deeper level, understanding the connections between seemingly unrelated events. The dynamic between Mysterian and other team members also reveals Kenny's natural leadership abilities, which emerge despite his typically quiet demeanor in civilian life. His moral authority and genuine heroic motivations make him a natural focal point for team members who are serious about actual hero work rather than publicity and ego gratification. This leadership potential, suppressed by his economic circumstances and family dysfunction in normal life, flourishes in the superhero context where actions matter more than social status. Kenny's relationship with his superhero identity becomes more complex during this period as he must navigate the difference between solo heroism and team dynamics. Working alone as Mysterian allows him complete control over his methods and priorities, but joining Coon and Friends forces him to compromise and collaborate with others whose motivations may not align with his own. This tension between individual moral clarity and group dynamics reflects real-world challenges faced by anyone trying to maintain ethical standards within organizational structures. The Coon and Friends storyline also explores how Kenny's unique relationship with death affects his approach to superhero work. His willingness to take extreme risks and make ultimate sacrifices gives him tactical advantages that other heroes cannot match, but also creates ethical dilemmas about the value of his life and the appropriateness of using his immortality as a strategic resource. These questions about the ethics of expendable heroism add philosophical depth to what could otherwise be simple superhero adventure stories. Perhaps most significantly, the Coon and Friends period demonstrates how Kenny's heroic identity serves as compensation for his powerlessness in other areas of his life. While he cannot control his family's dysfunction, his economic circumstances, or his cosmic curse, he can choose how to use his supernatural abilities in service of others. Mysterian becomes the vehicle through which Kenny exercises the agency and moral authority that poverty and childhood typically deny him. The eventual dissolution of Coon and Friends validates Kenny's decision to prioritize authentic heroism over group membership and social acceptance. The team's collapse under the weight of Cartman's ego and the other members' various personal agendas proves that Kenny's instincts about maintaining independence were correct. His ability to continue operating effectively as a solo hero, while his former teammates struggle with their own issues, demonstrates the strength and clarity of his heroic vision. The long-term impact of the Coon and Friends experience on Kenny's development as Mysterian cannot be overstated. The period teaches him valuable lessons about leadership, compromise, and the importance of maintaining moral standards even when working with others. These lessons serve him well in future solo adventures and help establish him as South Park's most reliable and effective superhero. The Coon and Friends saga ultimately serves to highlight what makes Kenny's heroism unique and valuable. Unlike his teammates, who are motivated by ego, excitement, or social belonging, Kenny's commitment to protecting others stems from genuine empathy and hard-earned wisdom about suffering and vulnerability. His experiences with the team reinforce his understanding that true heroism often requires isolation and sacrifice, and that the most important battles are often fought alone. The storyline also demonstrates how Kenny's civilian experiences inform his superhero work in ways that his teammates cannot match. His intimate knowledge of poverty, family dysfunction, and systemic failures gives him insights into the root causes of the problems he encounters as Mysterian. While other heroes address symptoms, Kenny understands underlying causes and can develop more effective solutions to the social problems that create the conditions requiring superhero intervention. Karen McCormick represents the purest and most powerful motivation in Kenny's life, serving as both the symbol of innocence he fights to protect and the living reminder of his own vulnerability and helplessness in the face of systemic failures. As Kenny's younger sister, Karen embodies everything that Kenny might have been in different circumstances: curious, hopeful, and trusting a world that Kenny knows to be dangerous and indifferent to children's welfare. His fierce protective instincts toward her reveal the depth of his capacity for love and sacrifice, while also highlighting the tragic irony that he can save others but cannot save himself. The relationship between Kenny and Karen operates on multiple levels of meaning within the broader South Park narrative. On the most immediate level, it represents the bond between siblings who must rely on each other for emotional support in a household where parents are too consumed by their own problems to provide adequate care. Kenny serves as Karen's primary protector, confidant, and source of stability in a chaotic environment where adults consistently fail to meet their basic responsibilities as caregivers. Karen's age and innocence make her particularly vulnerable to the various dangers that permeate the McCormick household and the broader South Park community. She lacks Kenny's hard-earned knowledge about the world's cruelties and operates with a natural trust and optimism of childhood, making her an easy target for exploitation and harm. This vulnerability triggers Kenny's deepest protective instincts, transforming his general heroic inclinations into specific, urgent missions to safeguard the person who matters most to him. The economic circumstances that define the McCormick family affect Karen in ways that are both similar to and different from their impact on Kenny. While both children experience poverty, food insecurity, and parental neglect, Karen's younger age makes her even more dependent on adults who are fundamentally unreliable. Kenny understands this dynamic and works to shield her from the worst effects of their circumstances, often sacrificing his own needs to ensure that she has access to food, clothing, and emotional support. Kenny's role as Karen's protector extends beyond simple physical safety to encompass emotional and psychological protection as well. He works to preserve her innocence and hope in situations where cynicism would be a more realistic response to their circumstances. This effort requires Kenny to maintain a careful balance between protecting Karen from harsh realities and preparing her to navigate a world that will not always be kind to children from families like theirs. The Mysterian identity becomes particularly significant in the context of Kenny's relationship with Karen, as it allows him to protect her in ways that his civilian identity cannot. As Mysterian, Kenny can investigate threats to her safety, intervene in dangerous situations, and address problems that ordinary children cannot solve. The superhero persona gives him the agency and authority to act on his protective instincts in ways that his normal powerlessness as a poor child would not permit. One of the most poignant aspects of Kenny's relationship with Karen is his awareness that he cannot protect her from the systemic problems that define their lives. While he can address immediate threats and specific dangers, he cannot change their family's economic circumstances, their parents' addictions, or the broader social conditions that create vulnerability for children like Karen. This limitation creates a constant source of frustration and sorrow for Kenny, who understands that his sister deserves better but lacks the power to provide it. Karen's presence in Kenny's life also serves to humanize him in ways that his deaths and resurrections might otherwise obscure. While his immortality could make him seem superhuman or disconnected from normal concerns, his love for Karen grounds him in fundamentally human emotions and relationships. His willingness to risk everything for her demonstrates that his heroic impulses stem from love rather than abstract moral principles or supernatural compulsions. The contrast between Kenny's relationship with Karen and his relationships with his friends highlights the different types of love and loyalty that motivate his actions. While he cares deeply about Stan, Kyle, and even Cartman, his bond with Karen operates on a more primal level of protection and responsibility. She represents family in the deepest sense, someone whose welfare is inseparable from his own sense of identity and purpose. Kenny's protective relationship with Karen also reflects broader themes about gender, vulnerability, and the responsibilities that society places on children to care for each other when adults fail. Karen's femininity and youth make her doubly vulnerable in a world that often preys on those who cannot protect themselves. Kenny's acceptance of responsibility for her safety demonstrates both his maturity and the tragic reality that children often must serve as parents to each other when actual parents are unable or unwilling to fulfill their roles. The emotional complexity of Kenny's relationship with Karen becomes particularly apparent in situations where his efforts to protect her conflict with other responsibilities or desires. His dedication to her welfare sometimes requires him to make sacrifices that other children his age would find incomprehensible, such as giving up food, opportunities, or friendships to ensure her safety and well-being. These sacrifices demonstrate the depth of his love, but also highlight the unfairness of circumstances that require such choices from children. Karen's trust in Kenny creates both motivation and burden for him, as he struggles to live up to her faith in his ability to protect her while knowing that his own circumstances are largely beyond his control. Her belief in his capability to solve problems and keep her safe gives him strength, but also creates pressure to succeed in situations where failure could have devastating consequences for the person he loves most. The relationship between Kenny and Karen also serves as a critique of social services and institutional support systems that consistently fail to protect vulnerable children. Despite clear evidence of neglect and endangerment in the McCormick household, external intervention remains minimal and ineffective, leaving Kenny to serve as Karen's primary source of protection and stability. This failure of adult institutions to safeguard children forces Kenny into roles and responsibilities that no child should have to bear. Perhaps most significantly, Karen represents hope for Kenny in a life otherwise defined by suffering and cosmic indifference. While he cannot escape his own curse or change his family's circumstances, he can work to ensure that Karen's life follows a different trajectory. His efforts to protect her innocence and provide her with opportunities represent his investment in a future that he may never live to see, but that gives meaning to his present suffering. The love between Kenny and Karen ultimately demonstrates that even in the darkest circumstances, human connection and care can provide purpose and motivation. Their relationship proves that heroism often begins not with grand gestures or supernatural abilities, but with the simple decision to protect those who cannot protect themselves, especially when the protector has every reason to focus only on their own survival and suffering. Kenny McCormick's iconic orange parka serves as far more than a simple article of clothing or visual gag. It functions as a complex symbol of identity, concealment, and social commentary that operates on multiple levels throughout South Park's narrative. The hood that perpetually obscures Kenny's face and muffles his voice represents one of television's most effective metaphors for how society renders certain voices invisible and inaudible, particularly those of the poor, marginalized, and powerless. The decision to keep Kenny's face hidden and his speech muffled was initially motivated by practical considerations and comedic effect, but it evolved into a profound statement about visibility and voice in American society. Kenny's parka creates a physical barrier between him and clear communication, forcing viewers and other characters to strain to understand his words. Much like society must make deliberate effort to hear and understand the concerns of those living in poverty or existing on society's margins. The orange color of Kenny's parka carries its own symbolic weight, standing out against South Park's typically muted color palette, while simultaneously marking Kenny as different from his friends. Orange is a color associated with caution, warning, and visibility. Ironic choices for a character whose voice is rarely heard clearly and whose deaths often go unnoticed or quickly forgotten. This visual paradox reinforces the theme that Kenny is simultaneously highly visible and completely invisible, present but unacknowledged, seen but not truly observed. The physical construction of the parka, with its oversized hood and thick material, creates a barrier that isolates Kenny from his environment while ostensibly protecting him from it. This duality reflects the complex relationship between protection and isolation that characterizes much of Kenny's existence. The parka shields him from South Park's harsh winters, but also prevents clear communication and human connection. Similarly, Kenny's defensive mechanisms protect him from emotional harm, but also keep others at a distance. The rare moments when Kenny appears without his parka take on enormous significance precisely because of their rarity. These scenes reveal not just Kenny's physical appearance, but also symbolic moments of vulnerability, authenticity, or transformation. When viewers finally see Kenny's face clearly, it represents more than visual revelation. It symbolizes moments when the barriers between Kenny and the world temporarily dissolve, allowing for genuine connection and understanding. Kenny's muffled speech pattern has become one of South Park's most recognizable elements, but its implications extend far beyond comedy. The inability of other characters and viewers to understand Kenny's words serves as a metaphor for how society fails to listen to or comprehend the experiences of those living in poverty. His friends' typical response to Kenny's muffled contributions, ignoring them or dismissing them as incomprehensible, mirrors how society often treats the voices of the marginalized. The few occasions when Kenny's dialogue is rendered clearly carry enormous narrative weight, marking moments of particular importance or emotional intensity. These instances of clarity often coincide with Kenny expressing frustration, anger, or pain, suggesting that only extreme emotions can break through the barriers that normally obscure his voice. This pattern reinforces the idea that society only pays attention to the poor and marginalized when their suffering becomes impossible to ignore. The parka also serves as a form of social camouflage that allows Kenny to navigate different social environments while maintaining his core identity. Unlike his friends, who must actively manage their self-presentation in different contexts, Kenny's hood provides consistent concealment that allows him to observe without being fully observed. This anonymity gives him unique insights into human behavior and social dynamics that inform both his civilian relationships and his heroic work as Mysterian. The relationship between Kenny's parka and his superhero costume reveals interesting parallels and contrasts in how clothing functions as identity expression. While the parka conceals and muffles, Mysterian's costume reveals and empowers. Both outfits involve hoods and concealment, but where the parka renders Kenny invisible and inaudible, Mysterian's costume makes him commanding and authoritative. This transformation suggests that Kenny's potential for agency and influence exists, but requires the right context and costume to emerge. The parka's role in Kenny's deaths adds another layer of symbolic meaning to the garment. In many cases, the hood and coat that are meant to protect him instead become entangled in the machinery or circumstances that cause his demise. This ironic reversal of protection into vulnerability reflects the broader tragic irony of Kenny's existence, where things that should provide safety and security often become sources of danger and suffering. The economic implications of Kenny's parka cannot be overlooked, as it represents the kind of practical, durable outerwear that working-class families purchase for functionality rather than fashion. The coat's worn appearance and consistent use suggest that it may be Kenny's only winter garment, highlighting the economic constraints that limit his clothing options and require him to make single items serve multiple purposes across different seasons and situations. Kenny's attachment to his parka also reflects psychological patterns common among children from unstable households, where maintaining control over small, personal items becomes crucial for emotional security. The consistency of wearing the same garment provides stability and identity in a life otherwise characterized by chaos and unpredictability. The parka becomes a form of armor that provides psychological protection even when it fails to prevent physical harm. The visual impact of Kenny's parka within South Park's animation style creates a distinctive silhouette that makes him instantly recognizable even at a distance or in crowd scenes. This visual distinctiveness ensures that Kenny never entirely disappears into the background, even when his voice cannot be heard or his contributions go unacknowledged. The parka makes him perpetually visible while keeping him symbolically invisible. The parka's role in concealing Kenny's expressions adds complexity to his character development, forcing viewers and other characters to interpret his emotions through body language, tone of voice, and action rather than facial expressions. This limitation paradoxically makes Kenny's emotional moments more powerful when they do break through, as viewers must work harder to understand his feelings and therefore become more invested in his emotional journey. Perhaps most significantly, Kenny's parka represents the broader theme of hidden identity that runs throughout his character arc. Just as the hood conceals his face, Kenny's true nature, experiences, and capabilities remain largely hidden from those around him. His deaths go unremembered, his poverty goes unaddressed, and his heroism goes unrecognized, all while he remains visually present and symbolically invisible. The enduring power of Kenny's parka as a symbol lies in its ability to represent multiple forms of marginalization simultaneously: economic, social, and existential. It serves as a constant visual reminder that some voices in society are systematically muffled, some faces are systematically hidden, and some experiences are systematically ignored, even when those being marginalized are standing right in front of us, clearly visible, but somehow still unseen. The catalog of Kenny McCormick's deaths represents one of television's most extensive and varied explorations of mortality, violence, and the dark humor that emerges from humanity's attempts to process the incomprehensible reality of death. Over the course of South Park's run, Kenny has died in ways ranging from the mundane to the fantastical, each death serving different narrative, comedic, and thematic purposes while contributing to a larger meditation on the nature of suffering, memory, and the value of individual life. The earliest deaths in South Park's first season established the template that would define Kenny's relationship with mortality for years to come. These initial deaths, being struck by lightning, trampled by cattle, or crushed by various falling objects, were characterized by their sudden onset, graphic violence, and the immediate dismissal of their significance by other characters. The pattern of unexpected death followed by Stan's shocked, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," and Kyle's angry, "You bastards," became the series' most recognizable routine, but also established the fundamental disconnect between the gravity of death and society's ability to process and remember individual suffering. As the series progressed, Kenny's deaths became increasingly elaborate and creative, evolving from simple accidents into complex Rube Goldberg-style chain reactions that seemed to target Kenny specifically. These more elaborate deaths served multiple purposes. They satisfied audience expectations for novelty and surprise. They pushed the boundaries of acceptable animated violence, and they began to suggest that Kenny's deaths might not be entirely random. The progression from accidental deaths to seemingly targeted ones foreshadowed the later revelation that cosmic forces were specifically controlling Kenny's fate. The variety of Kenny's deaths spans virtually every possible cause of mortality, from natural disasters to supernatural occurrences, from industrial accidents to alien intervention. Overall evolution from crude shock comedy to sophisticated social commentary, with Kenny's mortality serving as a vehicle for exploring increasingly serious themes. Perhaps most significantly, the comprehensive catalog of Kenny's deaths serves as a meditation on the arbitrary nature of mortality and suffering in the real world. Just as Kenny's deaths serve no apparent purpose and follow no discernible logic, real-world suffering often lacks meaning or justice. The randomness of Kenny's deaths reflects the randomness of poverty, disease, violence, and other forms of suffering that affect real people who have done nothing to deserve their fate. The ultimate impact of Kenny's deaths lies not in their individual shock value, but in their cumulative effect on both Kenny's character and the series' exploration of mortality, memory, and meaning. Through the simple device of killing and resurrecting the same character repeatedly, South Park created one of television's most complex examinations of death, suffering, and the human capacity to endure trauma while maintaining dignity, compassion, and hope for something better. The emergence of Princess Kenny during South Park's Game of Thrones parody episodes represents one of the most unexpected and revealing character developments in the entire series, showcasing Kenny's willingness to embrace femininity and challenge traditional gender roles, while simultaneously highlighting his creativity, adaptability, and complex relationship with identity and power. This transformation from the series' most marginalized character into a powerful feminine archetype reveals hidden depths of Kenny's personality, while serving as commentary on gender performance, social expectations, and the fluidity of identity. Princess Kenny's origin stems from the boys' elaborate role-playing game that mirrors the political intrigue and power struggles of Game of Thrones. But Kenny's choice to adopt a female persona goes far beyond simple gameplay mechanics. While his friends assume traditional masculine roles as warriors, kings, and lords, Kenny creates an entirely different kind of character, one that derives power from beauty, manipulation, and strategic alliance building rather than brute force or inherited authority. This choice reveals Kenny's intuitive understanding that power can take many forms and that sometimes the most effective approach involves subverting expectations. The visual transformation required for Princess Kenny demonstrates remarkable attention to detail and commitment to the character that goes beyond casual dress-up or comedy. Kenny's princess persona features elaborate costumes, makeup, and accessories that transform his typically androgynous appearance into something genuinely feminine and regal. This transformation requires significant effort and planning, suggesting that Princess Kenny represents more than a momentary whim or simple role-playing convenience. The personality that Kenny adopts as Princess Kenny differs dramatically from his typical reserved demeanor, revealing capabilities for manipulation, seduction, and political maneuvering that remain hidden in his normal life. Princess Kenny is confident, articulate, and commanding, qualities that Kenny's economic circumstances and family dysfunction typically suppress. This alternate personality suggests that Kenny possesses leadership abilities and social skills that only emerge when he's freed from the constraints of his normal social position. Princess Kenny's relationships with other characters in the role-playing game reveal Kenny's sophisticated understanding of social dynamics and power structures. Rather than relying on direct confrontation or traditional masculine displays of dominance, Princess Kenny uses charm, alliance building, and strategic positioning to achieve objectives. This approach demonstrates Kenny's awareness that different situations require different strategies and that effective leadership often involves adapting one's approach to circumstances rather than relying on a single mode of operation. The sexual and romantic elements of Princess Kenny's character interactions represent one of South Park's most complex explorations of childhood sexuality and gender identity. While maintaining the innocence appropriate for characters of their age, the Princess Kenny episodes acknowledge that children do experiment with different forms of identity and relationship dynamics through play. Kenny's comfort with adopting a feminine role and engaging in romantic storylines suggests an openness to different expressions of identity that contrasts with his friend's more rigid adherence to traditional masculine roles. The power dynamics within the Game of Thrones parody become particularly interesting when viewed through the lens of Princess Kenny's agency and influence. Unlike Kenny's typical position as the group's most powerless member, Princess Kenny becomes a central figure whose decisions and allegiances significantly impact the game's outcome. This reversal of Kenny's usual marginalization demonstrates how changes in context and identity performance can dramatically alter social positioning and influence. Princess Kenny's strategic thinking and political maneuvering reveal intellectual capabilities that Kenny's normal circumstances rarely allow him to display. The complex alliances, betrayals, and power plays that Princess Kenny orchestrates require sophisticated understanding of human motivation and social dynamics. These skills suggest that Kenny's apparent passivity in normal life stems from lack of opportunity rather than lack of ability. The commitment that Kenny brings to the Princess Kenny persona extends beyond the immediate role-playing sessions to encompass a fuller exploration of feminine identity and expression. This dedication suggests that Princess Kenny serves important psychological functions for Kenny, possibly providing an outlet for aspects of his personality that his normal social environment doesn't accommodate. The freedom to express different facets of identity through role-playing can be particularly valuable for children whose real-life circumstances severely limit their options for self-expression. The reactions of Kenny's friends to Princess Kenny reveal their own assumptions about gender roles and identity performance. While some characters accept Princess Kenny's feminine presentation without question, others struggle to reconcile this new persona with their existing understanding of Kenny's identity. These varied reactions mirror real-world responses to gender nonconformity and highlight how different people react to challenges to traditional gender expectations. The narrative significance of Princess Kenny extends beyond individual character development to encompass broader themes about identity, performance, and the relationship between internal self-concept and external presentation. Kenny's ability to successfully embody a convincing feminine persona suggests that gender itself may be more performative and fluid than typically assumed, while his comfort with this transformation indicates a secure sense of self that can accommodate different expressions of identity. The costume and aesthetic choices involved in Princess Kenny's design reflect careful attention to feminine archetypes and beauty standards while maintaining Kenny's essential character elements. The elaborate dresses, jewelry, and makeup represent significant departures from Kenny's usual appearance. Yet the character remains recognizably Kenny beneath the transformation. This balance between radical change and essential continuity suggests that identity can be both fluid and stable simultaneously. Princess Kenny's role in romantic storylines within the game represents one of the few contexts where Kenny experiences positive attention and desirability. While Kenny's poverty and marginalized status typically make him an unlikely romantic figure, Princess Kenny becomes an object of desire and competition among other characters. This transformation highlights how presentation, context, and social positioning can dramatically affect how others perceive and value an individual. The leadership qualities that Princess Kenny displays contrast sharply with Kenny's typical follower status within his friend group. As Princess Kenny, he becomes someone who sets agendas, makes crucial decisions, and influences outcomes rather than simply reacting to others' choices. This leadership capacity suggests that Kenny's usual passivity stems from circumstances rather than inherent personality traits. Perhaps most significantly, Princess Kenny represents Kenny's capacity for reinvention and transformation that goes beyond the supernatural elements of his death and resurrection cycle. While his immortality is imposed upon him by external forces, Princess Kenny represents a conscious choice to explore different aspects of identity and capability. This voluntary transformation demonstrates agency and creativity that provide hope for Kenny's ability to transcend his circumstances through his own choices and efforts. The enduring appeal and significance of Princess Kenny lies in how this persona reveals that even the most marginalized and apparently powerless individuals possess hidden depths, capabilities, and potential for transformation. Through Princess Kenny, viewers see that Kenny's circumstances may limit his opportunities, but cannot entirely suppress his intelligence, creativity, and capacity for leadership and influence. Kenny McCormick's relationship with supernatural forces extends far beyond his well-documented connection to the cult of Cthulhu, encompassing a broader pattern of encounters with otherworldly entities, mystical phenomena, and cosmic forces that position him as South Park's primary conduit between the mundane world and realms of supernatural power. This extensive involvement with supernatural elements reflects not only Kenny's unique status as an immortal being, but also his role as someone whose suffering and marginalization have opened him to experiences that others cannot access or understand. Kinney's supernatural encounters often occur when other characters remain oblivious to mystical threats or opportunities, suggesting that his repeated deaths and resurrections have heightened his sensitivity to supernatural phenomena. While his friends typically approach supernatural events with skepticism or humor, Kinney demonstrates immediate recognition and understanding of otherworldly forces, as if his experiences with death have given him insights into realities that exist beyond normal perception. This supernatural awareness positions him as both protector and interpreter of mystical threats to South Park. The cosmic horror elements that define Kinney's curse extend beyond simple Lovecraftian references to encompass a broader mythology of ancient powers, interdimensional beings, and forces that operate according to logic incomprehensible to human understanding. Kinney's position within this cosmic framework makes him simultaneously victim and agent of supernatural forces, trapped by powers beyond his control, yet uniquely qualified to understand and sometimes influence these same powers. His suffering serves supernatural purposes that may be meaningful on cosmic scales, even when they appear pointless from human perspectives. Kinney's role in various supernatural South Park episodes reveals his function as a supernatural catalyst, someone whose presence or participation enables mystical events to unfold. Whether dealing with demonic possessions, alien interventions, or interdimensional threats, Kinney often serves as the key figure whose unique properties allow supernatural plots to progress. His immortality makes him an ideal candidate for dangerous supernatural investigations, while his marginalized status means his involvement in mystical events often goes unnoticed or unremembered by others. The connection between Kinney's poverty and his supernatural encounters reflects broader themes about how marginalization can create openness to alternative spiritual and mystical experiences. Just as real-world individuals facing economic hardship sometimes turn to unconventional religious or spiritual practices, Kinney's family circumstances have made them vulnerable to supernatural influences that more stable families might avoid or resist. Kinney's supernatural sensitivity may result from this exposure to forces that operate outside mainstream society's awareness or acceptance. Kinney's mystical experiences often involve direct contact with entities and forces that his friends only encounter indirectly or through technological mediation. While Stan, Kyle, and Cartman might observe supernatural events through television screens or hear about them secondhand, Kinney frequently finds himself face-to-face with supernatural beings who recognize him as someone significant within mystical hierarchies. These direct encounters suggest that Kinney occupies a special position within supernatural power structures that exist independently of his human social status. The knowledge that Kinney gains through supernatural encounters often proves crucial for resolving mystical threats to South Park, even when his friends cannot remember or acknowledge his contributions. His familiarity with death, suffering, and cosmic indifference gives him insights into supernatural motivations and weaknesses that others lack. This specialized knowledge makes him uniquely valuable in supernatural conflicts, though his marginalized status means his expertise often goes unrecognized or uncredited. Kinney's supernatural abilities appear to extend beyond simple immortality to encompass various forms of mystical awareness and influence. His capacity to sense supernatural threats, communicate with otherworldly beings, and navigate mystical environments suggests that his curse has granted him capabilities that go far beyond simple resurrection. These abilities make him potentially one of South Park's most powerful residents, though his inability to control or fully understand these powers limits their practical application. The relationship between Kinney's Mysterian identity and his supernatural experiences creates interesting parallels between superhero mythology and mystical tradition. Just as Mysterian uses his knowledge of death to protect others, Kinney's supernatural encounters often position him as a guardian against mystical threats that endanger innocent people. His willingness to risk supernatural consequences to protect others demonstrates how his heroic instincts extend beyond purely physical dangers to encompass spiritual and mystical threats. Kenny's interactions with supernatural entities often reveal his essential humanity despite his otherworldly curse. While cosmic forces treat him as a pawn or tool, Kenny maintains his commitment to protecting others and preserving human values, even when dealing with beings who operate according to entirely different moral frameworks. This consistency of character across supernatural encounters demonstrates that his core identity remains intact despite repeated exposure to forces that could easily drive someone insane or corrupt their fundamental nature. The pattern of Kenny's supernatural encounters suggests that his curse serves purposes beyond simple punishment or cosmic indifference. His repeated interactions with mystical forces position him as a bridge between human and supernatural realms, someone whose unique experiences allow him to understand and translate between different forms of existence. This intermediary role may represent the ultimate purpose of his suffering, though Kenny himself remains largely unaware of this cosmic function. Kenny's supernatural experiences often involve moral choices that test his character in ways that purely human conflicts cannot. When dealing with entities that offer power in exchange for corruption or demand sacrifices for protection, Kenny consistently chooses to preserve his humanity and protect others even when supernatural alternatives might offer easier solutions. These moral tests reveal the strength of his character and suggest that his supernatural status comes with ethical responsibilities that he takes seriously. The isolation that Kenny experiences due to his supernatural encounters parallels his social marginalization, but operates on an even more profound level. While his poverty separates him from his friends' experiences, his supernatural awareness isolates him from normal human reality itself. This cosmic loneliness represents the ultimate form of marginalization. Separation not just from social groups, but from the fundamental assumptions about reality that allow most people to function in the world. Perhaps most significantly, Kenny's supernatural encounters reveal that his suffering serves purposes that extend beyond individual punishment or cosmic indifference to encompass broader themes about the relationship between human suffering and cosmic meaning. His experiences suggest that individual pain may serve functions within larger supernatural frameworks that operate according to logic incomprehensible to human understanding, while also demonstrating that maintaining humanity and compassion in the face of cosmic indifference represents its own form of supernatural achievement. The ultimate significance of Kenny's supernatural connections lies in how they transform his apparent victimhood into a form of cosmic responsibility, making him both recipient and agent of forces that shape reality itself, while requiring him to maintain his essential humanity despite exposure to powers that could easily destroy or corrupt anyone else who encountered them. The relationships that Kenny McCormick maintains with Stan Marsh, Kyle Broflovsky, and Eric Hartman form the emotional core of his existence, representing bonds that transcend the economic, social, and supernatural barriers that separate him from normal childhood experiences. These friendships operate on multiple levels of complexity, encompassing genuine affection, unspoken understanding, casual neglect, and moments of profound loyalty that reveal the true depth of connection beneath South Park's often cynical surface interactions. Stan Marsh's relationship with Kenny represents perhaps the most emotionally consistent of the group dynamics, characterized by Stan's genuine concern for Kenny's welfare and his role as the most likely to notice and react to Kenny's suffering. Stan's immediate shocked response to Kenny's deaths, the iconic "oh my god, they killed Kenny," reflects authentic horror and dismay that never becomes entirely routine despite the frequency of these events. This consistent emotional reaction suggests that Stan maintains the strongest empathetic connection to Kenny, even when the supernatural elements of Kenny's curse prevent him from retaining conscious memory of previous deaths. The friendship between Stan and Kenny operates on shared understanding of difficult family circumstances, though their economic situations differ dramatically. Both boys deal with parental dysfunction and domestic instability, creating a bond based on mutual recognition of adult failures and the need for children to provide their own emotional support. Stan's more privileged economic position allows him to offer Kenny practical help when possible, while Kenny's more extreme circumstances provide Stan with perspective on his own problems and gratitude for his relative advantages. Kyle Broflovsky's relationship with Kenny reflects his intellectual nature and moral sensitivity, often manifesting as philosophical concern about the injustices that define Kenny's existence. Kyle's response to Kenny's deaths, calling the perpetrators bastards, represents moral outrage at the unfairness of Kenny's suffering rather than simple shock at the violence. This response indicates Kyle's tendency to view Kenny's situation through ethical and intellectual frameworks that seek to understand and address systemic problems rather than simply react emotionally to immediate crises. Kyle's friendship with Kenny often involves attempts to include him in activities and conversations that Kenny's economic circumstances might otherwise prevent him from joining. Kyle's family's relative prosperity and emphasis on social justice create opportunities for Kyle to extend practical and emotional support to Kenny, though these efforts sometimes highlight the economic disparities between them rather than bridging them. Kyle's genuine desire to help Kenny often conflicts with his inability to address the fundamental systemic issues that create Kenny's disadvantages. The complex dynamic between Kyle and Kenny also reflects Kyle's struggle to reconcile his intellectual understanding of injustice with his emotional need to maintain childhood normalcy and friendship. Kyle recognizes that Kenny's suffering represents broader social failures, but he lacks the power or knowledge to address these systemic problems effectively. This limitation creates frustration that sometimes manifests as overthinking Kenny's situation rather than simply enjoying their friendship on its own terms. Eric Cartman's relationship with Kenny presents the most complicated and morally ambiguous friendship dynamic within the group, characterized by Cartman's typical selfishness and manipulation contrasted with occasional moments of genuine concern and loyalty. Cartman's treatment of Kenny often reflects his broader patterns of exploiting others for personal gain, using Kenny's poverty and desperation to manipulate him into dangerous or humiliating situations. However, these exploitative behaviors coexist with instances where Cartman demonstrates real affection for Kenny and anger when others threaten or harm him. The friendship between Cartman and Kenny operates partly on shared outsider status within South Park's social hierarchy, though their marginalization stems from different sources. While Kenny is excluded due to poverty, Cartman is often rejected due to his antisocial behavior and moral failures. This shared experience of social rejection creates an unexpected bond between them, with each recognizing the other as someone who understands what it means to be unwanted or dismissed by mainstream society. Cartman's relationship with Kenny also reveals important aspects of how friendship can persist despite moral disagreements and personality conflicts. Kenny's generally forgiving nature allows him to maintain affection for Cartman even when Cartman's behavior is objectively harmful or selfish. This forgiveness demonstrates Kenny's understanding that friendship involves accepting people's flaws while hoping for their better qualities to emerge, a perspective that his experiences with family dysfunction have likely reinforced. The collective dynamic among all four boys creates a friendship group where Kenny serves multiple functions that extend beyond simple membership. He often acts as a mediator during conflicts between Stan, Kyle, and Cartman, using his outsider perspective and emotional intelligence to help resolve disputes. His willingness to take risks and endure suffering also makes him valuable for group adventures that require someone expendable, though this utilitarian aspect of their friendship creates ethical complications about the nature of their care for him. Kenny's friends demonstrate their affection for him most clearly during crisis situations where their usual casual treatment gives way to genuine concern and protective behavior. When Kenny faces threats that go beyond his normal pattern of deaths and resurrections, Stan, Kyle, and even Cartman often rally to support him in ways that reveal the depth of their underlying attachment. These moments of crisis strip away the superficial aspects of their relationships to expose the fundamental bonds that unite them. The evolution of these friendships throughout the series reflects the boys' growing maturity and changing understanding of loyalty, responsibility, and care. Early episodes often feature more casual treatment of Kenny's suffering, while later seasons show increased awareness of his unique circumstances and more deliberate efforts to include and support him. This development suggests that genuine friendship involves learning to see and respond to friends' needs more effectively over time. The unspoken understanding that exists among the boys about Kenny's special circumstances creates a unique dynamic where they simultaneously acknowledge and ignore the supernatural elements of his existence. While they cannot consciously remember his deaths, they demonstrate unconscious awareness of his fragility and tendency toward misfortune, leading to protective behaviors that they cannot fully explain or articulate. Perhaps most significantly, the friendships between Kenny and his companions demonstrate that genuine affection and loyalty can transcend enormous differences in circumstances, personality, and capability. Despite economic disparities, supernatural complications, and individual character flaws, these four boys maintain bonds that provide emotional sustenance and social connection essential for navigating childhood challenges. The enduring nature of these friendships, despite all obstacles and complications, suggests that human connection represents one of the most powerful forces for meaning and stability in an otherwise chaotic and indifferent universe. Through his relationships with Stan, Kyle, and Cartman, Kenny experiences the love and belonging that his family's circumstances cannot provide, demonstrating that chosen family can be as important as biological family in providing the emotional foundation necessary for psychological survival and growth. The economic circumstances that define Kenny McCormick's daily existence serve as South Park's most unflinching examination of American poverty, revealing how financial hardship affects every aspect of a child's development, from basic nutrition and physical safety to educational opportunities and social relationships. Through Kenny's experiences, the series explores the systemic nature of economic disadvantage while avoiding both the romanticization of poverty and the demonization of the poor, instead presenting a realistic portrayal of how economic inequality shapes individual lives and community dynamics. Kenny's relationship with food insecurity represents one of the most immediate and visible manifestations of his family's poverty, affecting his physical development, academic performance, and social interactions in ways that compound over time. His regular diet of frozen waffles isn't merely a running gag, but an authentic representation of how poor families often rely on cheap, processed foods that provide calories but little nutritional value. The prevalence of these convenience foods in the McCormick household reflects both the financial constraints that make fresh, healthy food inaccessible and the time constraints faced by parents working multiple jobs or dealing with substance abuse issues. The impact of malnutrition on Kenny's physical development becomes apparent when comparing his stature and apparent energy levels to those of his better-fed friends. While genetic factors certainly play a role in individual development, Kenny's consistently smaller size and occasional lethargy suggest that chronic undernourishment may be affecting his growth and overall health. This nutritional disadvantage creates a cycle where poor health leads to reduced academic and social performance, which in turn limits future opportunities for economic advancement. Kenny's school experiences reflect the multiple ways that poverty affects educational outcomes beyond simple lack of resources. His hunger during school hours affects his ability to concentrate and learn, while his worn clothing and limited school supplies mark him as different from his more affluent classmates. These visible markers of economic disadvantage can lead to social isolation and reduced teacher expectations, creating self-fulfilling prophecies that limit educational achievement regardless of individual intelligence or motivation. The housing conditions in the McCormick household demonstrate how poverty affects basic safety and comfort in ways that extend far beyond simple aesthetics. Broken windows, malfunctioning heating systems, and general disrepair create living conditions that pose health and safety risks, while also affecting psychological well-being. The stress of living in substandard housing contributes to family dysfunction and makes it difficult for children to find quiet spaces for homework, rest, or emotional recovery from daily stresses. Kenny's limited wardrobe and the symbolic significance of his ever-present parka highlight how economic constraints affect personal expression and social interaction. While his friends can use clothing choices to express personality or conform to social expectations, Kenny's options are severely limited by his family's financial situation. The practical necessity of wearing the same winter coat year-round creates a visual identifier that marks his economic status, while also limiting his ability to adapt his appearance to different social contexts. The psychological impact of chronic financial stress on Kenny's development manifests in various ways throughout his character arc, from his general fatalism about life outcomes to his mature understanding of adult responsibilities and failures. Children from economically disadvantaged backgrounds often develop adult awareness of financial constraints and family problems at younger ages than their more privileged peers, leading to accelerated psychological development in some areas, while potentially limiting normal childhood experiences of security and carefree play. Kenny's awareness of his family's economic situation affects his relationships with friends in complex ways that go beyond simple embarrassment or shame. His understanding of financial limitations makes him reluctant to ask for help or participate in activities that might require resources his family cannot provide. This self-exclusion from certain social opportunities can lead to isolation and reduced social capital that affects long-term relationship development and community integration. The portrayal of Kenny's parents' economic struggles avoids simple moral judgments while illustrating how poverty creates conditions that make poor decisions more likely and good decisions more difficult to maintain. Stewart's employment instability reflects broader economic trends that have made working-class jobs less secure and less capable of supporting families, while Carol's substance abuse represents a common response to the psychological pressure of economic hardship. These individual failures occur within systemic contexts that limit options and increase stress. The contrast between Kenny's economic circumstances and those of his friends serves to highlight the arbitrary nature of childhood economic advantages and disadvantages. Kenny possesses the same intelligence, creativity, and moral capacity as his better-off friends, yet his opportunities are dramatically constrained by factors completely beyond his control. This disparity illustrates how economic inequality affects children who have done nothing to deserve disadvantage, while their peers enjoy privileges they have done nothing to earn. Kenny's economic experiences also demonstrate how poverty affects future planning and decision-making in ways that can perpetuate disadvantage across generations. When immediate survival needs dominate daily life, it becomes difficult to invest time and resources in education, skill development, or other activities that might improve long-term prospects. This focus on immediate needs over long-term planning represents a rational response to economic uncertainty, but can trap families in cycles of disadvantage. The series' treatment of Kenny's poverty avoids both the noble poor stereotype that romanticizes economic hardship and the undeserving poor narrative that blames individuals for systemic failures. Instead, Kenny's experiences illustrate how poverty represents a complex interaction of individual circumstances, family dynamics, and broader economic structures that create and maintain inequality regardless of individual character or effort. Kenny's resilience in the face of economic hardship demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and strength that children can develop when circumstances require them to do so. His ability to maintain friendships, pursue heroic activities as Mysterian, and preserve his moral compass despite overwhelming disadvantages shows that poverty need not define individual potential or character. However, this resilience comes at significant personal cost and should not be used to justify the systemic inequalities that create such hardship. Perhaps most importantly, Kenny's economic experiences serve as a reminder that poverty represents a policy choice rather than a natural phenomenon. The specific forms of hardship that Kenny experiences, food insecurity, housing instability, limited healthcare access, and social exclusion, all reflect societal decisions about resource allocation and social priorities. Through Kenny's story, South Park illustrates how economic inequality affects real children and families while suggesting that these conditions represent choices that could be made differently. The enduring significance of Kenny's economic circumstances lies in their role as a constant reminder that privilege and disadvantage are often matters of luck rather than merit, and that economic inequality represents one of the most persistent and damaging forms of injustice affecting children in contemporary society. The rare moments when Kenny McCormick's voice emerges clearly from beneath his orange hood represent some of South Park's most significant and emotionally powerful scenes, serving as breakthrough instances where the barriers between Kenny and clear communication temporarily dissolve to reveal the depth of his thoughts, feelings, and observations. These occasions of vocal clarity carry enormous narrative weight precisely because of their rarity, transforming what would otherwise be routine dialogue into profound revelations about Kenny's inner life and true nature. The technical and artistic choices involved in Kenny's muffled speech create a unique dynamic where viewers and characters must strain to understand his contributions to conversations, mirroring how society often fails to hear or comprehend the voices of marginalized individuals. When Kenny's voice does break through clearly, it typically occurs during moments of extreme emotion, anger, frustration, pain, or determination, suggesting that only the most powerful feelings can overcome the barriers that normally obscure his communication. One of the most memorable instances of Kenny speaking clearly occurs during his confrontation with his friends about his deaths and their inability to remember them. The clarity of his voice during this revelation serves multiple dramatic purposes. It ensures that his words cannot be dismissed or misunderstood. It emphasizes the gravity of his situation, and it demonstrates that Kenny possesses sophisticated understanding of his own circumstances despite his typically muffled communication. This moment transforms Kenny from passive victim to articulate critic of the cosmic forces that control his existence. Kenny's clear speech often emerges during episodes that focus specifically on his character development or supernatural experiences, suggesting that these moments of vocal clarity coincide with periods of personal growth or revelation. When Kenny speaks about his role as Mysterian, his protective feelings toward his sister Karen, or his frustration with his family's dysfunction, his words carry the weight of accumulated experience and hard-earned wisdom that his normal muffled delivery might not fully convey. The content of Kenny's clear dialogue reveals intellectual and emotional sophistication that contrasts sharply with the simplistic characterization that his muffled speech might suggest to casual observers. When finally heard clearly, Kenny demonstrates complex understanding of morality, justice, family dynamics, and social inequality that positions him as one of South Park's most perceptive characters. His articulate expression of these insights proves that his apparent passivity stems from circumstances rather than lack of intelligence or awareness. The emotional impact of hearing Kenny's true voice clearly often stems from the contrast between his typically resigned acceptance of suffering and the passionate conviction that emerges when he finally speaks out. These moments reveal that Kenny's usual silence doesn't reflect apathy or lack of strong feelings, but rather represents his adaptation to circumstances where clear communication seems futile or impossible. When he does speak clearly, it's often to express feelings that have been building for extended periods. Kenny's clear speech frequently occurs during moments when he advocates for others, particularly children or vulnerable individuals who cannot protect themselves. His articulate defense of his sister Karen, his clear explanations of threats to South Park, and his passionate arguments for justice all demonstrate that Kenny's communication barriers dissolve most readily when he's fighting for causes beyond his own welfare. This pattern suggests that Kenny's voice emerges most clearly when he's fulfilling his role as protector and advocate. The reactions of other characters to Kenny's clear speech often reflect their surprise at discovering the depth and sophistication of his thoughts and feelings. Friends who have grown accustomed to dismissing or ignoring Kenny's muffled contributions are forced to confront the reality that they have been missing important insights and perspectives. These moments of recognition sometimes lead to temporary improvements in how others treat Kenny, though the effects often fade as the immediate crisis passes. The technical aspects of Kenny's clear speech involve specific voice acting choices that distinguish these moments from his normal muffled delivery. The clarity isn't simply a matter of volume or articulation, but involves changes in tone, pace, and emotional intensity that mark these moments as fundamentally different from routine communication. This technical distinction helps viewers recognize the significance of these breakthrough moments and understand their importance within Kenny's character development. Kenny's clear speech often serves as exposition device that reveals crucial information about supernatural threats, family secrets, or social problems that other characters have missed or misunderstood. His unique perspective as someone who experiences death repeatedly and observes social dynamics from a marginalized position gives him insights that others lack. But these insights only become actionable when he can communicate them clearly. The correlation between clear speech and important revelations emphasizes Kenny's role as truth teller and witness. The themes explored through Kenny's clear dialogue often center on justice, protection, and the responsibility of those with power to help those without it. When Kenny speaks passionately about defending the innocent or confronting bullies and abusers, his clear voice carries moral authority that his muffled speech might not fully convey. These moments establish Kenny as South Park's moral center, someone whose suffering has created wisdom and whose marginalization has fostered empathy. The psychological implications of Kenny's vocal clarity pattern suggest that his normal muffled speech may represent a form of psychological protection as much as physical concealment. Speaking clearly makes Kenny more visible and vulnerable to rejection or dismissal, while muffled speech allows him to participate in social interactions without fully exposing himself to potential harm. The rare moments of clarity thus represent acts of courage as much as communication. Kenny's clear speech often includes references to experiences and knowledge that his friends cannot share or understand, particularly regarding his deaths and supernatural encounters. This exclusive knowledge, when finally articulated clearly, emphasizes Kenny's isolation even within his friendship group. The clarity of his voice during these revelations highlights the tragedy of having important experiences that cannot be shared or validated by others. The evolution of Kenny's clear speech throughout the series reflects his growing confidence and self-awareness, as well as the show's increasing focus on his character development. Early instances of clarity often involve simple expressions of frustration or pain, while later examples demonstrate more sophisticated articulation of complex ideas and moral positions. This progression mirrors Kenny's overall character growth from passive victim to active agent. Perhaps most significantly, Kenny's moments of clear speech serve as reminders that every individual possesses inner complexity and valuable perspectives that may not be immediately apparent to others. The dramatic impact of finally hearing Kenny's true voice clearly illustrates how much society loses when it fails to listen carefully to marginalized voices or create conditions where all individuals can communicate effectively and be heard with respect and attention. The ultimate power of Kenny's clear speech lies in its demonstration that behind every muffled voice, there exists a person with important things to say, complex thoughts to share, and valuable contributions to make to their community if only others will take the time and effort necessary to listen and understand. The evolution of Kenny McCormick from simple shock comedy device to complex character study represents one of South Park's most remarkable achievements in long-term character development, demonstrating how a series can transform what initially appears to be a throwaway gag into profound social commentary and genuine emotional investment. This transformation reflects not only the creative growth of the series itself, but also the power of sustained character development to reveal hidden depths and possibilities within seemingly simple concepts. Kenny's early characterization as the kid who dies established him as South Park's most expendable character, someone whose primary function was to provide shocking moments of violence before disappearing from the narrative until the next episode. This initial role positioned him as fundamentally different from Stan, Kyle, and Cartman, who were clearly intended as fully developed characters with distinct personalities, motivations, and story arcs. Kenny's apparent simplicity made him seem like a supporting character despite his membership in the core friend group. The gradual revelation that Kenny's deaths were not random events, but part of a larger supernatural mythology, marked the beginning of his transformation from gag character to tragic figure. The introduction of cosmic horror elements, family curses, and the cult of Cthulhu connection provided narrative framework that transformed Kenny's suffering from meaningless comedy into meaningful tragedy. This shift required viewers to reconsider their relationship with Kenny's deaths and question why they had found his suffering entertaining. The development of Kenny's family background and economic circumstances added crucial context that transformed his death from isolated incidents into symptoms of broader social problems. Understanding Kenny's poverty, family dysfunction, and lack of adequate protection recontextualized his vulnerability as social commentary rather than simple cartoon violence. This background development made Kenny's suffering more meaningful while also indicting the social systems that failed to protect him. Kenny's emergence as Mysterian represents perhaps the most significant step in his character evolution, transforming him from passive victim into active hero. The superhero identity allowed writers to explore Kenny's agency, moral convictions, and leadership capabilities while maintaining continuity with his established supernatural elements. Mysterian proved that Kenny possessed heroic potential that his circumstances had previously suppressed, revealing hidden depths of character that earlier episodes had only hinted at. The exploration of Kenny's relationships, particularly his protective bond with his sister Karen, added emotional complexity that elevated him from symbolic figure to fully realized individual. These relationships demonstrated Kenny's capacity for love, sacrifice, and moral reasoning while providing motivation for his heroic activities. The family dynamics revealed Kenny's maturity and sense of responsibility while highlighting the tragic irony that he could protect others but not himself. Kenny's rare moments of clear speech served as breakthrough instances that revealed his intellectual and emotional sophistication to viewers who might have underestimated his depth due to his typically muffled communication. These vocal revelations demonstrated that Kenny possessed complex thoughts and feelings that his circumstances normally prevented him from expressing effectively. The contrast between his muffled and clear speech became a metaphor for how society fails to hear marginalized voices. The series' treatment of Kenny's economic circumstances evolved from simple comedy to sophisticated social criticism, using his experiences to explore themes of poverty, inequality, and systemic disadvantage. Rather than simply mocking his family's dysfunction, later episodes examined the root causes of their problems while maintaining empathy for individuals trapped in cycles of disadvantage. This development transformed Kenny from object of ridicule into subject worthy of serious consideration. Kenny's supernatural experiences expanded beyond simple death and resurrection to encompass broader involvement with cosmic forces, otherworldly entities, and mystical phenomena. This expansion of his supernatural role positioned him as South Park's primary interface with forces beyond normal human understanding, making him uniquely qualified to address threats that other characters couldn't comprehend or handle. His supernatural sensitivity became an asset rather than simply a curse. The introduction of alternative personas, like Princess, Kenny demonstrated Kenny's flexibility and creativity while revealing aspects of his personality that his normal circumstances suppressed. These identity experiments showed that Kenny possessed capabilities for leadership, strategic thinking, and social influence that poverty and marginalization typically prevented him from developing. The alternative personas proved that Kenny's apparent limitations stem from circumstances rather than inherent deficiencies. Kenny's role within his friend group evolved from expendable fourth member to essential moral center, someone whose experiences with suffering and injustice provided perspective and wisdom that his more privileged friends lacked. His loyalty, forgiveness, and capacity for sacrifice demonstrated character strengths that emerged from his hardships while inspiring growth in others. The group dynamics shifted to acknowledge Kenny's unique value and irreplaceable contributions. The thematic significance of Kenny's character development extends beyond individual growth to encompass broader commentary on how society treats its most vulnerable members. Kenny's transformation from ignored victim to recognized hero mirrors the potential for social systems to evolve from neglect and exploitation toward recognition and support. His character arc suggests that every individual possesses hidden potential that appropriate conditions and opportunities can reveal. Kenny's journey from simple death gag to complex character study demonstrates the power of long-term storytelling to discover meaning and depth within concepts that initially appear shallow or purely comedic. The writer's commitment to developing Kenny's character over multiple seasons allowed them to explore themes and relationships that wouldn't have been possible within his original limited role. This development process shows how sustained creative attention can transform any character into something meaningful and significant. The cultural impact of Kenny's evolution reflects broader changes in how audiences engage with animated characters and expect depth from entertainment that might previously have been dismissed as purely comedic. Kenny's transformation helped establish South Park's reputation for sophisticated social commentary, while proving that even the most apparently simple characters can serve as vehicles for exploring complex themes and issues. Perhaps most importantly, Kenny's character development serves as a reminder that every individual, regardless of circumstances or apparent limitations, possesses inherent worth and hidden potential that deserves recognition and development. His evolution from expendable gag character to beloved hero demonstrates that society's most marginalized members often possess the greatest capacity for wisdom, empathy, and moral leadership if given the opportunity to develop and express these qualities. The ultimate legacy of Kenny's transformation lies in its demonstration that sustained attention, creative development, and genuine care can reveal profound depths within any individual or character, transforming what initially appears simple or disposable into something complex, valuable, and essential to our understanding of human nature and social responsibility. Kenny McCormick stands as one of television's most paradoxical characters, simultaneously the most expendable and most essential member of South Park's cast, a figure whose repeated deaths mask an immortal spirit that embodies resilience, compassion, and quiet heroism in the face of cosmic indifference. His journey from simple shock comedy device to complex moral center represents more than character development. It reflects humanity's capacity to find meaning and purpose despite suffering that serves no apparent cosmic purpose and offers no guarantee of justice or reward. The enduring fascination with Kenny stems from his unique position as someone who experiences ultimate vulnerability, death itself, yet continues to return with undiminished capacity for love, loyalty, and sacrifice. His immortality operates not as superpower, but as supreme burden, condemning him to eternal childhood while forcing him to accumulate infinite wisdom about pain, loss, and the arbitrary nature of suffering. This combination of vulnerability and invincibility creates a character who embodies both human fragility and human endurance in their most extreme forms. Kenny's role as South Park's heart becomes most apparent when considering how his presence affects the moral landscape of the series. While his friends often succumb to cynicism, selfishness, or moral confusion, Kenny maintains unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent and vulnerable. His experiences with death and poverty have taught him that life is precious precisely because it is fragile, and that those who possess power, even the temporary power of being alive, bear responsibility for protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The symbolic significance of Kenny's orange parka extends beyond simple visual recognition to encompass broader themes about visibility and voice in contemporary society. His muffled speech serves as metaphor for how marginalized voices are systematically rendered inaudible, while his bright orange coloring ensures that he remains visible even when unheard. This paradox of simultaneous visibility and invisibility reflects the experience of many real-world individuals whose presence is acknowledged, but whose perspectives are ignored or dismissed. Kinney's economic circumstances provide crucial context for understanding his character's broader significance within South Park's social commentary. His poverty isn't merely background detail, but fundamental aspect of his identity that shapes every interaction and opportunity. Through Kinney's experiences, the series explores how economic disadvantage affects children who bear no responsibility for their circumstances, yet suffer consequences that compound over time and limit future possibilities regardless of individual merit or effort. The supernatural elements that define Kinney's existence serve multiple narrative and thematic functions that extend beyond simple plot mechanics. His curse transforms him into a living reminder that suffering often serves no comprehensible purpose and follows no discernible logic. The cosmic forces that control his fate operate according to alien motivations that render human concerns meaningless. Yet Kinney's response to this cosmic indifference demonstrates that meaning can be created through individual choice and moral action, even when a universe provides no inherent purpose or justice. Kinney's development as Mysterian represents his refusal to accept victimhood as permanent condition, instead choosing to transform personal trauma into protective service for others. The superhero identity allows him to exercise agency and moral authority that his normal circumstances deny him, proving that heroism often emerges from suffering rather than strength. Mysterian becomes vehicle through which Kinney demonstrates that those who have experienced vulnerability are often best qualified to protect others from similar harm. The relationships that Kinney maintains with his friends illustrate the power of human connection to transcend enormous differences in circumstances, personality, and capability. Despite economic disparities, supernatural complications, and individual character flaws, these bonds provide emotional sustenance essential for psychological survival. Kinney's loyalty to friends who sometimes barely notice his suffering demonstrates forgiveness and resilience that few could maintain under similar circumstances. Kinney's protective relationship with his sister, Karen, reveals the depth of his capacity for love and sacrifice, while highlighting the tragic reality that children often must serve as parents to each other when adults fail in their responsibilities. His fierce dedication to Karen's welfare demonstrates that Kinney's heroic impulses stem from authentic empathy rather than abstract moral principles, grounding his supernatural adventures in fundamentally human motivations and relationships. The evolution of Kinney's character throughout South Park's run reflects broader themes about potential, recognition, and the importance of sustained attention in revealing hidden depths within individuals and communities. His transformation from expendable gag character to beloved hero demonstrates that every person possesses inherent worth and capabilities that appropriate conditions and opportunities can develop and express. Kinney's rare moments of clear speech serve as breakthrough instances that reveal intellectual and emotional sophistication hidden beneath surface appearances. These vocal revelations prove that Kinney possesses complex thoughts and valuable perspectives that his circumstances normally prevent him from expressing effectively. The dramatic impact of finally hearing his true voice illustrates how much society loses when it fails to create conditions where all individuals can communicate effectively and be heard with respect. The cultural impact of Kinney's character extends beyond entertainment to encompass broader conversations about poverty, marginalization, and social responsibility. His story serves as a reminder that behind every muffled voice and overlooked individual exists a person with important contributions to make if given opportunity and attention. Kinney's journey from ignored victim to recognized hero suggests possibilities for social transformation that begin with recognizing dignity and potential in every individual. Perhaps most significantly, Kenny McCormick represents hope, not naive optimism that denies reality's harshness, but mature hope that acknowledges suffering while refusing to surrender compassion, courage, or commitment to protecting others. His continued capacity for heroism despite cosmic-level trauma demonstrates that human spirit can endure unimaginable hardship while maintaining essential humanity and moral clarity. The ultimate lesson of Kenny's story lies in its demonstration that meaning emerges not from cosmic purpose or divine plan, but from individual choices to act with love, courage, and sacrifice in service of others. His immortality becomes blessing rather than curse when used to protect innocent and vulnerable, transforming personal suffering into social contribution that justifies continued existence despite its costs. Kenny McCormick embodies truth that every society must learn. Those who suffer most are often capable of greatest wisdom and compassion, and those who seem most expendable may prove most essential to communities' moral health. His story reminds us that heroism requires no special powers beyond willingness to act on behalf of others, and that immortality's true measure lies not in duration of existence, but in positive impact on lives of others. In a world often characterized by cynicism and indifference, Kenny McCormick stands as an eternal reminder that individual choice to care, protect, and sacrifice for others represents most powerful force available for creating meaning and justice in otherwise arbitrary universe.